Hi there.
How you doing? Welcome to Texas.
Thank you very much for having me here. You feel right at home?
It is great to be home.
You said last night you were looking forward to being home.
Last night was the first night I've slept in my own bed in a month. It was wonderful. I woke up with my daughter Catherine coming and jumping on my lap, and that's about as good a way to wake up as there is.
That's perfect. Congratulations on that. All right, let's talk about last night, because Nevada did not work out exactly the way you would have hoped. But you came out and suggested, look, in your view, this is a two-man race at this point. And the reason you said that is because no one has ever won the nomination without winning one of the first three primaries. The converse to that, though, is that no one who has won both New Hampshire and South Carolina, like Donald Trump has ever gone on to lose the nomination. So is history our guide here, or isn't it?
Well, listen, there has never been a candidate like Donald Trump. And so in a whole lot of ways. And so I think some of the rules historically go out the window. Listen, I think fairly speaking, there are three major candidates remaining in this field: Donald, Marco, and me. Donald has a lot of momentum right now. He's won three primaries. That's a significant accomplishment. But what I think those results show is that the only campaign that can beat Donald, and the only campaign that has beaten Donald, is our campaign. And in my view, you look nationally, anywhere from 65 to 70% of Republicans don't think Donald is the right candidate for us to nominate to go up against Hillary Clinton. The polling shows Donald against Hillary loses. And the folks here, we don't want to lose this general election and see our country stuck on this same wrong choice. And so if you're among those 65, 70% of Republicans that think Donald is the wrong choice, then Super Tuesday is the opportunity for us to coalesce behind our campaign, because we're the only campaign in a position to beat him on Super Tuesday, to win the nomination, and then to go on to win the general.
But what do you make of it? Because you look at the results in South Carolina, where they had nearly 70% evangelicals. This should have been a sweet spot for you. Nevada, too, had a healthy portion of evangelical voters and libertarian voters, two good areas for you, and yet he won handily. Why?
Well, listen, Donald is formidable. People are ticked off. They're furious with Washington. They're furious with politicians in both parties that have been lying to them. And I think Donald's support is a manifestation of that. But what the polling data also shows is that head-to-head, Donald against me, we beat Donald handily. We beat him by 16 points, 56 to 40. I think Donald has a relatively high floor of about 20 or 25%. That'll be with him almost no matter what. As he said, he could walk out on Fifth Avenue, shoot someone, and those supporters will still be with him. That may be true. But I also think he's got a fairly low ceiling. I think it's 35 to 40%. And a majority of Republicans don't think he's the right nominee. And if you look nationally, in the head-to-head polls, Donald consistently loses to Hillary. I consistently beat Hillary. And so the question right now is, how do we prevent nominating a candidate who loses the general election? Or for that matter, if Donald wins the general election, who the heck knows what he'd do as president? We need a president we can trust.
Let's talk about Marco Rubio and you for a couple minutes, because some of your top surrogates and supporters, including Bob Vanderplaat and Steve Deese, have come out and questioned your strategy of going after Marco Rubio. You're not focused on the right guy. A couple of these states, he's been behind you. And the question is whether you're going to change tactics at all going forward.
Well, let me be clear. The right guy to be focused on, I think, are the American people. It's the working man and woman. It's
but
you've
been doing that.
That is my focus, is talking about how we fix these problems. Talking about, for example, repealing Obamacare. Talking about adopting a simple flat tax and abolishing the IRS. Look, if you look at the economy...
Oh, they love the IRS. Do you know the Texan people?
There's an old Pace Picani ad, if you remember, about...
They know what you're talking about.
Talking about where'd this picani sauce come from, and they look at the can and say, New York City, get a rope. Now,
Wait,
Texans feel the same way.
Is there some mocking going on here? I just want to be clear. Is that what's happening?
Well, Texans feel the same way about income taxes. We don't have an income tax in Texas. We don't want an income tax in Texas. And padlocking the IRS would be a very good thing.
All right, enough from me. Let's get to the Texas voters, because we want to start off with one of the top stories of the day, the new developments in the battle over choosing a successor for the late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. Now, the Washington Post is reporting that the White House is actually vetting, this is something Harry Reid floated today as a possibility, centrist Republican Nevada Governor Brian Sandoval as a potential nominee. A Republican, I say. President Obama said he hopes the Senate will consider his nominee once he makes his choice. Republicans, meantime, on the Judiciary Committee yesterday said they want to wait on any hearings until after this election. Bob Presatera came here tonight with his son, and the court is his top concern. So, Bob, tell us your question.
Mr. Cruz, during the past 7 years, we have witnessed an unprecedented disregard of the Constitution.
Yes.
With the passing of Judge Scalia recently, a lot of folks are worried about the fundamental principles of our country, what our country was founded on, being in jeopardy. What would you do in order to restore faith in the high court's ability to uphold our constitutional rights?
Well, Bob, thank you for that question. You know, Justice Scalia's passing, I think, really underscored the stakes of this election. 3 days ago, I was up in D.C. at Justice Scalia's funeral. He was someone I was blessed to know for 20 years. I knew him personally. He was brilliant. He was principled. He was ferociously devoted to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And his passing leaves the court very much in balance. We are one liberal justice away from seeing just about every one of our fundamental rights in jeopardy. You know, as you know, before I was in the Senate, I was the Solicitor General of Texas, the chief lawyer for the state in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. And I held that post for 5.5 years, defending the Constitution, defending the Bill of Rights. If you look at some of our biggest victories, we defended the Ten Commandments monument that stands on the state capitol grounds here in Texas. We went to the Supreme Court, and we won 5-4. We're one liberal justice away from the court ordering Ten Commandments monuments to be torn down all over this country. We defended the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. The biggest opinion of Justice Scalia's tenure on the court was Heller versus District of Columbia. I represented 31 states in Heller defending the Second Amendment, and we won 5-4. We are one justice away, one liberal justice away from the court essentially erasing the Second Amendment from the Constitution, including not a one of us has any individual right to keep and bear arms whatsoever. If you care about the right to life, if you care about marriage or religious liberty or the Second Amendment or privacy, every one of those is hanging in the balance with this court. Now, I believe that Justice Scalia's passing has really emphasized to the voters that we're deciding not one branch of government but two. And I think this should be a question for the voters. I agree with the decision of the Senate. Indeed, I called for the Senate to do what Republican leadership has said we're going to do, which is not confirm any nominee, whoever it is, because for 80 years the Senate has not confirmed any Supreme Court nominee nominated during an election year. Instead, we should take it to the people. Let the people decide. And I got to tell you, Bob, I can't wait to stand on that debate stage with Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders and to make the case to the American people. If they want to put another left-wing justice on the court, if they want to take away our religious liberty, if they want to undermine our right to keep and bear arms, let them make the case to the American people, because I don't think that's our values, and I'm happy to defend our values. And I give you my word, Bob, I've spent from a lifetime defending the Constitution, that every justice I appoint will be a principled constitutionalist who will be faithful and will ferociously defend the Bill of Rights for your kids and for mine.
Very good. All right, well, our next question comes from Wanda Ricketson. Wanda lives right here in Houston. She says she is wavering between Senator Rubio and Senator Cruz and is concerned about the mess that we have seen in Washington in recent years. Wanda, what's your question?
Okay, thank you for coming here and to all the candidates, actually. I guess Donald Trump loves everyone but Texas. And thank you, Senator Cruz, for going to Washington on behalf of our state to shake things up. I truly admire you for being a true constitutional conservative.
Thank you.
However, sometimes your hardline stance on the issues comes across as polarizing and uncompromising. And I'm just worried that if you were elected, that we would get 4 more years of nothing substantial getting accomplished in Washington again. So are you willing to compromise and reach across the aisle to get things done? Because frankly, I do respect Marco Rubio for at least trying to get something done with immigration and the Gang of Eight.
Well, Wanda, thank you for that question. And I appreciate it. Listen, I understand where that question is coming from. We've got huge challenges in this country, and we've got to fix them. I mean, every one of us, we're not interested in a bunch of talk. We're actually interested in fixing them. Now, when it comes to compromise, my view is simple. I'm not willing to compromise on core principles. I'm not willing to compromise on fundamental beliefs. I'm not willing to compromise on the promises that I made to the men and women who elected me. But my view is also, my view is also, Reagan said, what do you do if someone offers you half a loaf? Answer, you take it. And then you come back for more. And so I'm perfectly happy to compromise with anyone, Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian. Heck, I'll even compromise with Martians. If they're moving in the right direction, if we're solving the problems, if we are reducing the debt, reducing the spending, protecting our liberties. The problem with Washington, the deals always go backwards. You get this word in Washington over and over again of let's compromise. Let me tell you a story that is an example. I wrote a book last year called A Time for Truth. And the opening chapter of the book talks about the fight over the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling had a big fight. You remember, it was a knockdown, drag-out fight. President Obama, he wanted trillions more in debt with no spending reforms whatsoever. Now, it wasn't shocking that he asked for that. It was an audacious opening bid, but it wasn't shocking. What was shocking is what happened next, which is the House leadership decided to give it to him. So House leadership joined up with about, I think it was 192 Democrats to pass a clean debt ceiling with no spending reforms whatsoever. They overruled about 200 Republicans. It then went to the Senate. Now, in the Senate, the ordinary rules are to move to proceed to take up a debt ceiling takes 60 votes. That's the way the Senate has operated for years. But any rule in the Senate can be changed by unanimous consent. Well, the week we were taking it up, Republican leadership stood up, asked all of us, said, we want to ask you to consent to lower the threshold for Harry Reid to take up the debt ceiling from 60 votes to 50 votes. And leadership told us, every one of you, all 45 Republicans, this is when we were in the minority, should agree to this for 2 reasons. Number one, because if we do it, it will happen. And hallelujah, hallelujah, that's what we want. We're afraid of this issue, kick the can down the road. We're not prepared to fight. But number two, if we lower the threshold to 50, the Democrats will have the votes to do it on their own. So we can all vote no. And we can tell our constituents we opposed the thing we just consented to allow happen. Now, I'm sitting there, Wanda, listening to that. And I had no choice. I raised my hand. I said, listen, there's no universe in which I can agree to that. I spent 2 years traveling the state of Texas telling Texans, if you elect me, I will fight with every breath in my body to stop the out-of-control spending and debt that is bankrupting our kids and grandkids. Now, I said, listen, I'm perfectly happy to agree to something that raises the debt ceiling and puts some spending reforms in place, to use leverage to start solving the problems. But if we make it easier for Barack Obama and Harry Reid to add trillions in debt with no spending reforms, I think that would be both unfaithful and dishonest to the men and women who elected me.
Got to leave it at that for right now. We are not done, not by a long shot. We're going to take a quick commercial break, but don't go away because more of our one-on-one with Senator Ted Cruz is next. We are coming to you tonight from the Queensbury Theater in Houston, Texas. Yes, again. Still to come tonight, Senator Marco Rubio, Governor John Kasich, and Dr. Ben Carson. On the stage with us right now, Texas Senator Ted Cruz. So we want to get right to our next question, which concerns women in the military. And it has been a hot-button issue both in Washington and on the campaign trail, especially during the South Carolina vote. This question comes from Roseanne Rodriguez, who is an Army vet. She was deployed in Iraq on the front lines of the fight. Want to mention that she is also a volunteer with the Texans for Rubio group. So this is your chance, Senator, to convert her over to your side. Roseanne, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Cruz, for being here and for taking my question. At several rallies, you have stated that you would be against requiring young women to register for selective service. There's been a lot of discussion about lowering standards or setting standards to accommodate women in combat roles. I believe that this is a different issue. As an Army veteran, a medic, and paratrooper who deployed to Iraq and served on the front lines and in combat, I would like to know why you think young women are less capable or owe less of a debt to this country than our young men are.
Well, Roseanne, let me start by saying thank you for your service. Thank you for stepping up and defending this nation. You know, listen, I fully agree with you that women are capable of doing incredible things. I'm the father of 2 young daughters who I think can accomplish whatever they set their heart's desire to. But I also think when it comes to the military that we shouldn't be being governed by political correctness. And the question of the draft is a very different story. It's one thing to say, look, we have many, many women who serve courageously in the military, and that's their choice, their voluntary choice. But I don't think we ought to be forcibly drafting women, particularly putting them in a position where they're in combat. I don't think that makes sense. I don't think it's beneficial to the military. If women want to step forward and serve voluntarily, I think that's perfectly appropriate, and it's a wonderful thing. It makes sense to be drafting women in combat. And I would note, you know, we had a debate a couple of weeks back where 3 of the candidates, including Marco, came out in favor of drafting women. The next week, Marco joined Mike Lee and me in legislation prohibiting women from being forced into being in the draft. So he backed away from that position right after taking it.
Can I just follow up on her? Why don't you think it makes sense?
Because I think it risks putting women in an unfair situation. You know, you've got if you're looking at close combat, for example, if you're dealing with a 200-pound jihadist, the idea that we will forcibly take our daughters and put them in a position where they could be in close combat, I don't think that makes sense, and it's not recognizing the realities of combat. You know, the Marines recently did studies on this, looking that putting women in that position ended up increasing casualties both among the women and among the men, that it decreases military effectiveness. And the job of our warfighters is to defeat the enemy. It's not to be this cauldron for social experiments or political correctness. It is to keep America safe.
All right, I want to get to our next question. And our next question is really interesting. Less than a month ago, a grand jury right here in Houston, Texas, was investigating criminal allegations of misconduct against Planned Parenthood, captured in a series of undercover videos. Instead of indicting Planned Parenthood for anything that was in those videos, they decided to indict 2 of the pro-life activists who shot the footage. David Deladian, founder of the Center for Medical Progress, was handed felony charges of tampering with a government record and a misdemeanor count related to purchasing human organs. He wasn't actually trying to purchase them, but he was acting the part. Lauren Day is a big backer of religious freedom. She just drove 2 hours so she could stand here and ask this question. Lauren, you have the floor.
If David Deladian's case became a federal one, would you pardon him?
Lauren, thank you for asking that question. The answer is yes. And let me flesh it out a little more. Listen, as a Texan, as a Houstonian, I was deeply dismayed and disappointed to see the Harris County District Attorney bringing criminal charges against someone who went undercover to expose what appears to be vast criminal conduct by Planned Parenthood. I think he performed an incredible public service. And I'll tell you this, I've pledged, if I'm elected president, on the very first day in office, I intend to instruct the U.S. Department of Justice to open an investigation into Planned Parenthood and to prosecute any and all criminal conduct by that organization.
What do you make of Donald Trump's assertion that Planned Parenthood does some wonderful things, and that while we shouldn't pay for the abortion services, it does provide a lot of health services to women?
You know, there are a lot of things Donald has said that I disagree with, and that is very near the top. Planned Parenthood is the nation's largest abortionist. Millions of unborn boys and girls have never breathed a breath of air because of Planned Parenthood. It is a multi-million-dollar organization. And you know what these videos showed? It is a federal criminal offense. It's a felony to sell the body parts of unborn children for profit. These videos showed Planned Parenthood, by all appearances, doing that. It appears Planned Parenthood is a national criminal enterprise committing multiple felonies. Now, the Obama Justice Department is so partisan and politicized they won't investigate it. And I got to say, anyone that in light of that on national television rhapsodizes about how wonderful they think Planned Parenthood is, listen, we're going to have to respectfully disagree. I don't think a criminal enterprise taking millions of unborn children is wonderful in any way, shape, or form, and I don't think they should get federal taxpayer dollars.
I want to say, of course, for the record, that Planned Parenthood denies all that and is facing no criminal charges as a result of this. Just want to see if we have one more. Do we have time for one more? We don't. Want. No, wait, one more. Okay, we do. Jorge, he's here. Jorge Virial, you have a message for, you have a question for Senator Cruz about the Hispanic vote. Let us know.
Yes, Senator Cruz. So I'm mainly interested in the Republican Party growing to Latinos, especially Mexicans and Puerto Ricans. So my question for you is, what is your message to those Latino conservative voters who are undecided and may be confused by the promises of your fellow Republican primary opponents?
Well, Jorge, thank you for that question. It is incredibly important. As you know, Texas is a majority-minority state. And one of the things I was very proud of when I ran for the Senate in 2012 was receiving the votes of 40% of Hispanic voters here in Texas at the same time that Mitt Romney was getting clobbered with 27% of the Hispanic votes nationwide. It is absolutely clear that Republicans have to do a much better job in the Hispanic community. Now, I think the answer to do that, I don't think it's that you pander. I don't think it's that you embrace amnesty and open borders. In fact, I think a great many Hispanics in this country, legal immigrants and citizens, don't favor open borders. It's their jobs often that are being taken away by people who are coming here illegally. I think the way that you earn the votes of the Hispanic community, the way that I earn the votes here in Texas, is making the case that conservative principles work. You know, if you look at what do we believe in the Hispanic community, faith, family, patriotism, love of God. If you look beyond at opportunity, you know, I've told many times my dad's story. Coming from Cuba with nothing, he was imprisoned, he was tortured. He had $100 in his underwear. Making 50 cents an hour. I try to think of every policy from the perspective of my dad, that teenage kid washing dishes. You know, if he was still washing dishes today, the odds are very high he would have lost his job because of Obamacare. Obamacare is costing the jobs of millions of teenage immigrants just like it. And if he hadn't lost his job, he would have had his hours forcibly reduced to 28, 29 hours a week because Obamacare kicks in at 30. And as president, I intend to fight to lift the burdens on small businesses. So people like my dad, people in the Hispanic community, washing dishes on the bottom rungs of the economic ladder, who want to achieve the American dream can do that. And I believe that's a message that resonates powerfully in the Hispanic community.
We are going to have to wrap it up with Senator Cruz. I forgot to ask you one question. I just want to get this in before I let you go. Mitt Romney came out today and said that every candidate should release his tax returns. Will you do so, and when, and how many years?
Absolutely. I'll release the remainder of what we have this week. I've released already, I think, 5 years worth. But look, the nice thing is I haven't made enough money that my tax returns are not that interesting.
It'll be a speed read for us.
Yeah, you know, it's not all that complicated. I recognize that Donald's tax returns are a little more complicated. You know, an awful lot of people speculate that he hasn't made nearly as much money as he said. Who knows, because he doesn't release his tax returns. But you know, I do think Mitt has a good point that the voters are entitled to know before they vote, because you better believe the Democrats, if there's anything in there, the Democrats are going to go to town on this. The Democrats are, I mean, look, to be honest, an awful lot of the mainstream media is using kid gloves on Donald right now because they want Donald to be the nominee, and the instant he's the nominee, they will unleash every cannon they can to elect Hillary Clinton. We can't risk that, because if we do, we are going to lose the country. We're going to be buried in debt. We'll lose the Supreme Court. We can't let that happen.
Thank you so much, Senator. Great to see you. Thanks for being here.